Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leveraging Technology to Streamline Sustainability Operations. This webinar today is hosted by Lucid Coast and IBM, and I just want to thank everyone for being here live with us. So here is today's agenda. We will start with an overview of the sustainability landscape, breaking down some terms and definitions, and then we will do a deep dive into what organizations are dealing with in 2023. After that, I'm going to identify some challenges and opportunities when it comes to planning for sustainability initiatives, and then I will pass it off to Phil, and he will break down what it means to operationalize sustainability. He will discuss what it means to have a return on investment when investing into sustainability. And then finally, we will have an overview of the technology solutions we offer with some questions at the end. The people delivering this webinar to you today are myself, Jalen Sims, and also Phil Redmond. We're super excited to dive into this, and we thank you all for participating today. And as a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat, and or you could save them for the end of the presentation where we'll be having our Q&A session. So, like I said, we're going to be beginning with an overview of the sustainability landscape. And with this, I want to discuss some definitions of sustainability and some common terms, just so then we're all on the same page and we have an understanding together. So the first thing I wanted to go through is the UN SDG, or the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These are a set of 17 global goals adopted by the United Nations in 2015 to address the world's most pressing economic, social, and environmental challenges. These goals cover a range of issues, including renewable energy, economic growth, sustainable cities and communities, education, health, and more. Organizations and governments around the world are increasingly recognizing the importance of these goals, and they're taking steps to integrate them into their strategies and operations. And by working together to achieve these goals, we can create a more sustainable and equitable world for future generations. So some ways that the UN SDGs are affecting organizations and governments are, first off, just setting a common agenda. These goals provide a common framework for action, enabling organizations and governments to align their strategies and efforts to achieve common goals. Secondly, this creates opportunities and drives innovation. The UN SDGs are encouraging the development of new technologies and business models that promote sustainable development and are creating new business opportunities in areas such as technology, renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and ecotourism. Thirdly, the UN SDGs are encouraging partnerships and collaboration among governments, civil society, and the private sector to address complex challenges that require collective action. Because we cannot solve these problems alone. We all know that. And finally, these goals are increasing the accountability across the marketplace by providing a set of clear and measurable goals for organizations and governments to track their progress towards sustainable development. Next, I want to talk about ESG, and this stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. And this is a framework for evaluating a company's sustainability and ethical impact. ESG criteria is used by investors, financial institutions, and stakeholders to assess a company's performance beyond traditional financial metrics. Environmental, this stands for a company's impact on the environment, such as greenhouse gas emissions, water and waste management, and resource depletion. The social criteria evaluates a company's impact on society, such as labor standards, human rights, community involvement, and product safety. And governance, this evaluates a company's internal practices and policies, such as board compensation, executive compensation, and also transparency across the organization. And these ESG factors are becoming increasingly important for investors, board members, consumers across the market. And as we seek to make informed decisions that align with our values and address long-term goals and risks, and not just risks for society, but also risks for the environment around us, Companies that prioritize ESG factors are seen as more likely to achieve sustainable growth and also deliver long-term value to people. Next, I want to go into corporate social responsibility, or CSR. And this refers to a company's voluntary actions to address social, environmental, and ethical issues beyond legal requirements. Many companies are being forced by governing authorities to address these ESG concerns, and others are willingly taking responsibility for the impact on society. Corporate social responsibility encompasses a wide range of activities, such as reducing carbon emissions, conserving natural resources, reducing waste. Socially, this could be improving working conditions, promoting diversity and inclusion, supporting local communities, and respecting human rights. And then ethically, we could conduct business with integrity. We could look to create win-win situations, avoid corruption and bribery, and also promote transparency across all levels of the organization. And this is all important for companies because it helps build trust and credibility with consumers and stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, I'm including customers, employees, investors, and also the wider community where businesses are located. These companies that prioritize corporate social responsibility are seen as more sustainable and better able to manage long-term risks, while also creating value for society and the environment. A couple weeks ago, I read a report that said about 70% of people would choose to be involved with sustainable products and organizations over their non-sustainable competitors if they are aware of the difference. And this leads me to greenwashing, because, like I said, corporations that advertise their products and services as sustainable are more likely to succeed. But greenwashing is when they advertise to be sustainable, but they are actually not. And this is important for us as consumers and business partners to hold organizations accountable and do the research necessary so then we can support companies that are actually doing what they say they are and providing value for society and the environment. Next, I want to talk about some ways that we can expect to work within the next 10 to 15 years. And this is with Industry 4.0. So Industry 4.0 refers to the fourth industrial revolution. And this is characterized by the integration of advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, robotics, cloud computing, and advanced software into different manufacturing processes. Industry 4.0 aims to create smart factories, smart organizations, smart cities, where machines, equipment, and products communicate with each other and with humans, enabling for greater automation, efficiency, more flexibility. This technology-driven approach to manufacturing is expected to lead to improved productivity, reduced costs, increased quality, and also greater customization of products. And it's also expected to transform the way that businesses operate, creating new opportunities for growth and also innovation. But to achieve Industry 4.0, there are some key things that need to be in place, and that's what this list below is for. The first one is automation, and this refers to the use of technology to perform tasks without human intervention. So you could think of robots. It involves the application of various tools, machines, and software to automate repetitive, manual, or even complex tasks that were previously performed by humans. Think about entering facilities data into a spreadsheet, or maybe putting tracking devices on different meters around the organization, so then you can take different siloed information and feed it into a dashboard that you can then navigate and view the data very easily. Overall, though, automation has the potential to revolutionize the way that we do business by reducing human error, increasing productivity, and enabling organizations to focus on higher level tasks that require human expertise or even creativity. And by automating our systems, we will be able to look at big data analytics in a clear way that is easy to navigate and report on. And when we're able to use big data analytics properly, we can then start seeing patterns within our organizations. And this is where things like predictive maintenance comes in. So at Lucid Coast, we work with software that can work with technicians and facility managers to then predict when to replace and repair key components in operations and utilities. And this allows us to use the full life cycle of our machines and also mitigate when parts are breaking down. And if parts are breaking down, that would also lead to shutting down maybe a whole plant, which would then lead to loss of profit. So all of this data that I'm talking about is coming from different sources, whether it be machines, utility bills, or different meters. And this is where the human-machine interface comes in. And this is very key in our success to peak performance. And this is where humans actually interact with the machines that they're using. So you could think of different hardware, software, different dashboards, things like screens, touch screens, computers, and other different input and output devices. And the design of the HMI, or human-machine interface, is critical to ensure that the user can effectively interact with the machine and achieve the intended outcomes. And this involves considering factors such as the user's knowledge, skills, experience, the complexity of the machine and its tasks that it's performing, the context of the use, and also the desired level of automation. So whether we want the machine to do 100% of the task or maybe 50% of the task. And if you feed it a bunch of data into a dashboard, it has to, look pretty and also make sense. It's not ideal to feed a bunch of data into a machine or into an interface, and then you're just looking at a spreadsheet of numbers and you still have to figure out what it all means. So design is very key when it comes to the human-machine interface. And with everything I've discussed so far, this is the beginning of what a smart factory or smart organization would start to look like, when all of the machines, meters, and facilities are interconnected and sending real-time updates and reports to managers and technicians. And this is when operationalizing sustainability is beginning, and we're using our time as efficiently as possible. Think about when all of the organizations could hit a button to generate a real-time report, and all of that data funnels into an HMI where everyone can easily read reports and understand the data. And then we can start putting those data into public forums. And then this is where we start to have supply chain transparency. And then we can really understand our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Next, I would like to talk about some challenges and opportunities that organizations are facing when it comes to implementing sustainability initiatives. So the big 4 things that I thought of are awareness, planning, tracking, and reporting. So starting with awareness, there are 5 points that I wanted to bring up. And the first is the lack of education. And this can have a significant impact on awareness about sustainability initiatives, because without proper education, people may not be fully aware or understand the importance of sustainability and its benefits, which can then lead to lack of interest in these initiatives. Additionally, people may not know what sustainable products or practices look like, and that can make it difficult for them to participate in these different initiatives. Furthermore, lack of education could contribute to misconceptions about sustainability and even misinterpreting what any of this information means, which can lead to confusion or apathy among consumers. One example of this, of people not fully understanding the impact of their daily actions or environments, as I was saying, some people may not fully understand the impact that their daily actions on the environment, or they may not understand the consequences of unsustainable practices in their life. So this is why education plays a crucial role in creating awareness about sustainability initiatives. Limited access to information could also contribute to problems with awareness. And this is because it could make it hard for consumers to make informed decisions about the products that they purchase. And within large organizations, limited access to data could keep leaders in the dark when it comes to investing into sustainability. And when you're in the dark, you don't really know which way to steer the ship. And it's essential to provide and or find access to accurate and reliable information to promote awareness and encourage sustainability practices. Next is short-term thinking, and this can lead to a lack of investment in sustainable technologies and processes. If people don't really see the value in investing in sustainable products, then they may not allocate resources to develop a sustainable infrastructure that could then reduce their carbon emissions or even mitigate climate change as a whole. So to promote sustainability, it's going to be essential to communicate the long-term benefits of sustainability initiatives and also encourage investment in sustainable practices and also different technologies. And finally is the economic barriers. And this can have a significant impact on awareness about sustainability initiatives because one may not know the cost of what a sustainable product or technology is. So it's important that we educate others on these economic barriers and then help people overcome those economic barriers. Moving on to planning. So when we're planning for these initiatives, the first thing that you need to do is understand who your stakeholders are and what do they want. Are your board members looking to comply with regulations from the federal government? Are, let's say, students, are they urging your college to take action around sustainability? Are your employees complaining about how challenging their jobs are due to manual processes? Once you know what the needs of your stakeholders are, then you must establish clear goals and clear metrics that are transparent and achievable. And the biggest challenge with planning these initiatives is balancing the short-term financial goals with the long-term sustainability objectives. Because as we know, money keeps the world in operation, so it's imperative that your team understands what resource constraints that your organization may have and then plan accordingly. And in this ever-changing world, it's very, very important to stay up to date with changing regulations, disruptive technology like AI, and also keeping in touch with your stakeholder expectations. Because once we move out of the planning stage, then we go into the tracking stage. So tracking is huge, huge, huge challenge for organizations. From what I've seen in my position as a sustainability specialist, the larger the organization, the harder it is to find data that is relevant to create these reports to push out to your stakeholders. Much of the data is siloed in different departments, and it takes an extensive amount of time to gather. And I've also seen that most people are still crunching numbers and entering data manually into Excel spreadsheets. And while this gets the job done, Excel works great, it's important to ask how many hours are being sacrificed on repetitive, monotonous tasks. I've also seen in multiple cases that within organizations, there's usually one person with all of these systems and all of this knowledge on how to track and report on the data. That what happens if this person disappears from the organization, whether they leave for some reason? All of those systems and all those knowledge then are out the window, and then the organization is left in shambles, spending time, money, and resources trying to get back to operational standards. And this is not good. We cannot be relying on a single person to have all of this knowledge and data. And this is partially where this webinar was born from, as we're looking to tackle these problems around tracking and reporting on sustainability data. And also in regards to security with your data, what happens when the single computer holding all of your Excel sheets potentially gets hacked or even compromised? This could cause a lot of problems, and these are things that leaders aren't often thinking about, that they could be catastrophic for organizations. Finally, I wanted to go into reporting, which for some is the hardest part in all of this. Collecting accurate and reliable data on sustainability can be super challenging due to the complex nature of data and also the lack of standardized reporting methods. This can make it difficult to compare data across different industries and also different companies. So when we're looking to track scope 3 emissions across the market, if there isn't a standardized reporting, then it can be super challenging to collect all of this data from all of these different companies. And when you're having trouble reporting, this is how greenwashing is likely to permeate across the organization. Because if there's not clear metrics and clear data from previous years, then it can be easy to mislead or perceive your organization as more sustainable, when in reality, it's not. It's just the numbers that are all jumbled up. So it's super important to gather a full cache of information each year so then we can set clear goals for improvement. And communicating this sustainability data effectively and transparently to stakeholders can be just as challenging as collecting the data. And leaders of these companies must effectively communicate their sustainability practices and progress to stakeholders in a clear and concise manner, because companies may be hesitant to disclose certain information or may not have the complete information on their sustainability practices, which can then lead to lack of trust and lack of credibility and reporting. So just a small recap of these challenges. I know that was a lot of information to be thrown out at once. Feel free to take a screenshot of this slide or take a look at it for just 1 second. So just going over it real quick, it's awareness, planning, tracking, and reporting that I have found to be some of the hardest challenges for these organizations. Okay, so next up, I would like to introduce Phil Redmond. He serves as the ecosystems lead in Americas for IBM. And in his role, Redmond is responsible for recruiting, enabling, and collaborating with IBM sustainability partners like East Coast. He has extensive experience working on sustainability programs with large enterprises and also the adoption of sustainability tools and technology, as well as the development of different sustainability tools and technology. So with that, I would like to pass it off to Phil.
Thanks, Jalen. Hi, everyone. Appreciate you being here today. It's exciting to talk about this subject, and that was some good background on ESG and sustainability, and get everybody kind of level set on some of the terms that we'll be talking about, because if you're not familiar or if you're new to this area, which a lot of people are, as it becomes more important in their organization, it's really different than maybe things that you've done before, especially if you come out of an operations team or an asset team or data center. And so understanding all these key terms are really critical, because more and more companies are going to be leveraging your area to reduce their emissions, to help them with their targets, and they're going to be using your capabilities in order to meet those commitments and targets. And so what happens is that today companies obviously make a lot of decisions based on financials, based on the growth of their market, doing well in their market, whatever they're doing. And so that's important, but they're not really thinking as much around the sustainability impact around those decisions and kind of what they're doing in the place. And as you can see from what Jalen was talking about, is that more and more companies will be making business decisions based upon sustainability requirements. That means that, if you're in manufacturing, you may decide to build a new plant, decide where to put the plant based on power requirements, based on water, et cetera, versus where is the lowest cost. That basically cost is going to become a factor, but it's not necessarily become the driving factor anymore, because you have commitments, you've got targets. You also may have regulations. There may be in the future more regulations around what companies can do in terms of their emissions. And so they need to be able to practice better practices in order to support that and meet those targets and meet those regulations. And so having that data and using technology to help with those decisions will be critical. And this isn't going to be in just one part of the enterprise, right? It's going to be throughout the enterprise. It's going to be driven by, the CEO down. And so each part of the enterprise, will have requirements that they need to meet. And that's going to be a critical thing to understand, because today a lot of it is driven out of maybe one area. There's a lead in sustainability, social governance, DEI, all different areas, marketing, finance, legal, compliance, operations, real estate. All these areas can be involved in and will continue to be, but more and more these areas will also be required to meet certain levels, meet certain targets. And without knowing what to do, right, that's not going to be possible. And that's what the idea of bringing technology will do, will help each of these different business units, each of these different leaders to be able to make better decisions that are in line with what the company, what the organization is planning. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So clients are facing many questions as they pursue their sustainability journey. Jalen had gone through quite a bit around the environmental, social, and governance. And they have to balance their revenue. They have to balance the risk that they get from making those investments, from working with certain suppliers, with issues around materials, with laws and regulations, with climate risks. Even the SEC is proposing that companies on their annual reports and their regular quarterly reports are going to have to address what those risks are based on climate change, right? And that's a big difference to what's been done in the past. And so, companies are going to have to really kind of take a look at that and understand, their financial, their social, all different levels of risk related towards climate change. And so understanding, where that's coming from is going to be key. And the idea is they need to, optimize their operations and their costs, and still grow their business, right, as that moves forward over the next few years. But they also, as they're growing their business, potentially, are going to have to reduce their emissions, reduce their waste, watch what they're doing with water, using, renewable resources. And so setting a target today and prioritizing that is great, but you have to understand that that's a moving target. Right? These are moving targets all the time. And so that number is always changing. And so looking at it once a year, looking at it maybe twice a year isn't really going to be helpful. We're moving towards where we're ability to look at this in a real-time practice, across these different areas. So there are metrics and KPIs that we can focus on, that we can feed data into in order to see how we're succeeding. And so that's a critical thing. So let's go to the next slide. As I mentioned, your business changes. And so there are the different areas that you want to look at, and in support of operationalizing sustainability to get to, your lower emissions specifically. So this is kind of targeting, emissions reduction. Emissions obviously wasn't really mentioned too much, but, emissions are, leading cause of climate change and, causing the disturbances in the environment. And so, as I mentioned, you have your emissions today, but as your business, shrinks and as it grows, that target moves. And so there are different areas that companies will focus on, whether it's their operational efficiencies, so how to optimize for that, and you need data around that. Whether it's around changing equipment out and getting more efficient equipment too. So whether it's through lighting or your HVAC system, all these things are important, and so you have to make decisions on when you're going to make those investments. A lot of times they were made on whether something's working or not. Now you may make those investments based upon new technologies, new capabilities, new efficiencies that will help you reach those targets. But again, you need data to make those decisions. The split on your renewables and what you're doing, whether it's going to be on-site or off-site, depending on if you're doing your own generation, whether you're working with utilities that can provide you, different capabilities, whether you're investing in this area. So obviously that's going to be a big impact. And, many of the largest companies today have invested in renewable resources, and that's really gone a long way towards getting them towards a net zero target. Net zero meaning zero emissions. And so scope 3 is probably one of the biggest ones too that companies are looking to address. Today we're seeing 25-30% of companies are starting to move towards scope 3 emissions reduction, assessment of those emissions, where the focus has been on scope 1 and 2, scope 1 being your primary direct emissions, 2 being your indirect emissions, and scope 3 being everything else, especially for most organizations, their purchased goods and services, or the use of the product by their customers, right? Those are the kind of the two typically the largest, but there are 15 categories of scope 3. And so that's a huge area for companies to target, and probably one of the biggest challenges for companies, as that could be 6 to 7 times their scope 1 and 2, but one of the biggest challenges that they have in getting that data. Think about customer data, especially when you think about your upstream and the challenges that you have, even for large companies, they're downstream with their suppliers, is a huge challenge of or anything with their suppliers, it's a huge challenge of getting that data. And so that's a huge challenge there that companies are still trying to deal with today. And then, of course, there's going to be some need for high quality offsets in order to make sure that you can eliminate any of those emissions, those regular emissions. And so these are huge challenges that companies want to have to deal with today, and that they're looking for technology, they're looking for new methods and processes in order to support those capabilities for them to be successful in their targets and their decarbonization and their journey towards that. So let's go to the next slide. So how can IT meet the needs of the businesses without compromising the ability of future generations, right? That's the big question that companies have. They look at a couple different things, obviously their application performance. So what are they doing in terms of pulling in data, the impact of to the environment, and each organization is going to have a different journey around this. Each sector has a different impact. There are high emitters, there are no emitters. There are those that are high scope 1, those that are just mostly in scope 2. So they're going to have to assess what that environmental impact is, and what their footprint is, and what that is today, and then also plan for the future. And the same thing, what that cost might be in those plannings. And so this isn't a short-term plan, which is also a huge challenge. When companies are looking at these different areas, there's the long-term plan that they have. We're talking many companies have been made commitments that are start around 2050, right, to get to net zero. Some are 2040. Some have even moved those up to 2030. But these are long-term plans that need to be done, and so it's often difficult for us, especially if we think about 10 or 15 or 20 years out, in order to move in this direction. The challenge is that we need to move today, because the impact just grows and becomes greater the longer that we wait. So organizations are doing that long-term planning and looking at these areas and trying to balance the impact in each of these different areas. So go to the next slide. The challenge is that without data, it's difficult to make those decisions, right? Most companies today are kind of doing best efforts. They are, looking at and certainly you can say, oh, we reduce the amount of power that we use, right? That will reduce our footprint, right? But understanding how much power you're using, where you're using it, all that is really critical. Understanding the mix of renewables versus using fossil fuels at your utilities, especially over a large number of properties, right? It's fairly complicated, and it's difficult to make those day-to-day decisions without the data. And so that's why we think it's critical to find that data, right? Jalen had mentioned that that's one of the biggest issues, tracking that data down and then putting it into a system of record, right? Where it's a centralized system of record that companies can then analyze, right? And derive insights into their business and what to do next. So that's what we call about operational. And that has to go into and be impacted by, affect every part of the business. So as I mentioned, whether it's, your legal and compliance, whether it's your procurement, whether it's your operations team, your real estate team, whether it's your asset management team, right, facilities, all these different areas are impacted by this. And so, but today they just don't know what to do. They don't know what to prioritize. Again, you can make some assumptions, but that gets even, more challenging as time goes on, and as the big rocks are moved. And so continually monitoring this and pulling in new data is going to be critical. And that's kind of what we're talking about. And that's the key thing. The data is out there, right? This is not like, you're discovering new data. The data is out there. It's just like, where does it sit? It typically doesn't sit in any type of centralized environment, especially for large organizations who are disparate, across multiple regions and countries and across different states. It becomes a huge challenge. But the data is there, and data complexity is nothing new, right? Many companies have been dealing with this for years, but now this is maybe a different type of data that they haven't looked at before. But it's out there, and so the question is like, how do you pull that all together, and then how do you analyze that data? Many companies today are using manual processes for these. How do you pull the data together? You send it through an email, or you put it into a shared folder. But this isn't the most effective way of managing that data. So we think there are different ways of doing this, and we see a lot of companies that are moving more in the direction of using technology to be able to pull that data in, reduce the time it takes to pull that data in, reduce the effort that it takes, also be more efficient in it in terms of getting as much data as possible to make the best decisions, and then being able to analyze that data to make those decisions. So let's look on the next slide, please. So when we think about like data, right? Data is a foundation to sustainability reporting. Here at IBM and at Visi, we look at kind of the key parts of this. Like a report is a dashboard, or it could be a required compliance report, or a framework, or a customized report, right? That the data is going to give you insights into, whatever area you're looking into, right? Obviously, we provide software to support the optimized use of existing resources, whether it's from your data center, whether it's from your facilities, right? We can look at things like workload and consolidation for your data center. All these different things that we could do. Data center is one of the big targets, for those companies that are running their own data centers. There's a great way of opportunities for reducing the power of those data centers and optimizing that. That's one of the areas that we pull in and provide technology to be able to do that, data center reduction and optimization. Obviously, energy is one of the biggest challenges that companies have today in terms of their footprint. And so data center optimization is a big piece of that. And so we use technology through Turbonomic in order to give that insights into the optimization of the data center. Next slide. But our portfolio, right, is differentiated to handle data across all different areas and different types of data. So we have, that data challenge, and the challenge is that, how do you pull in all these different pieces? These are just, examples of data and systems and infrastructure and technology. So you can see it can get complicated, pretty quickly. And there's lots of different data sets, and this data may not be comparable, especially when it comes to things like carbon emissions. And so this data has to be converted into a kind of uniform way, right, to simplify it and to make sure that it can be comparable and converted into emission standards, right? And so there are emissions factors that each of these different data sets potentially would have, right? And you have to build a model around that. And of course, that changes all the time. And so companies have a wide variety of this different type of data and systems that they need to monitor. And that's, maybe a key for you to understand in the terms of complexity and why it's not simple. So, not only do you have to convert these factors into understanding what that does in terms of your carbon footprint, your GHG, your greenhouse gas footprint and emissions, but then you have to reconvert it back and say, like, well, how can we make an impact on this? And that's why I think that it's impossible to do this in a manual way, because the complexity is just too much, and there isn't any one person that can understand each of these different systems. It's spread throughout a whole environment. So having tools to help you do those conversions and then help you kind of align priorities based upon what the data gives you is going to be key. And so I think more and more, we can use technologies like Jalen had mentioned, automation, artificial intelligence, all these different things that can help us in order to make that change and to give us those insights. So let's move to the next slide. And so when we look at that, we look at what are the key areas within a typical company's environment, right? Their portfolio that they have in order to kind of support and make those changes. Where will the biggest changes come from? And so, at a top level, many companies are looking at a sustainability strategy and a roadmap. So we have a garage for sustainability to help companies, put that roadmap together, advisory services. They often are reporting on these for their internal reports or external reports. And so we have something called IBM and Visi, ESG Suite, which is a system of record that can pull all that complex data, do all those emissions, over 50,000 emissions factors, and convert that into a greenhouse gas footprint, and then help give insights and help companies derive actions that they can take in each of these different areas, understand what their risks are. We've integrated our weather suite into that, so our environmental intelligence suite, so we can look at heating days and cooling days, help forecast what the impact that will, of energy will be based upon the weather. Potentially look at things like risk models, climate warming models, all those different things that companies need to do in preparing kind of for the future. Planning and analytics from our open pages, helping, to put together, again, risk models and understanding risk areas overall. Then we look at areas like asset management, your different assets that you might have, your HVAC. We look at facilities, things like utilization, occupancy. These are key questions that we're getting from customers today. They really want to, dive down deep and look at not just occupancy over a month or over a week or even over a day. They're looking at hourly occupancy, and looking to shave off, the cost it takes to put together, support electricity for that building or for a room even. So it's not even just a building, it's not even just a floor, it could be even a specific room and what the usage is there. So we've got technology and applications, Maximo, which looks at assets and can do things like predictive maintenance. So to reduce the impact that it costs, you before things go haywire. So look at, before it's unoptimized, give you insights into, when that might be. Tririga looks at facilities and we look at utilization and occupancy, right? And we can overlay that to, the impact onto the environment. Responsible computing, green IT, I mentioned Turbonomic. We've got different capabilities in the IBM cloud to help, reduce those emissions. And then, of course, sustainability, supply chain, circularity, as I mentioned, supply chain intelligence suite and Sterling order management that help kind of look at your suppliers, assess what your suppliers are doing, and help you, get those insights to reduce the risk of, potential issues that might come up, in terms of working with those suppliers and where they're sourcing materials from, or supply chain transparency, which is becoming more critical, and knowing your suppliers and the suppliers, right? Very complicated, over thousands of suppliers. So all of these things are technology and advisory services that we can bring to support any type of industry around their sustainability journey. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, and we have, just a select list of customers here. We're working with hundreds of customers. We've been doing this for many years. IBM started doing their own sustainability journey back in the 1950s and have been publicly talking about our carbon footprint since the 1990s. We use these technologies on our own too, as you can see here, in order to be able to track our own journey across a large global international company. So we think that's super important, but we've got some great client case studies that are listed here, and we're happy to talk about kind of what each of these different organizations are doing in order to become more successful in their sustainability journey too. The great piece is that we're linking a lot of these capabilities together. And so the idea is that we'll be able to pull more data down from each of these different areas, assess that data, and then push data back to help companies, and organizations make those better business decisions. So next slide, please. So the vision is, we look across the sustainability software portfolio, right? Today this is just, at the beginning of this, but we've already linked up Maximo and Tririga with Envisi, with Environmental Intelligence Suite with Envisi, Turbonomic also is being integrated in. So we can pull down data from each of these different areas and then, make it much easier to assess that information. So when we mentioned talking about, finding that data, well, a lot of the data, from your facilities sits in Tririga or Maximo. And so now we're able to, if you're an IBM customer, pull that in. Now, of course, with Envisi Intelligent, Envisi ESG Suite, we can, integrate into any of your systems, whether it's IBM or not. But we've built in these integrations that make it much easier if you're already using these capabilities and these applications. And so, we're at the beginning. We've launched phase 1 last year. We have phase 2 coming out the first half of this year. And so we're really excited because it really helps get a time to value for the software much quicker. It helps put more data in, more accuracy of data, traceability of data. And then in the future, we'll be pushing that data back up to help organizations prioritize in each of these different areas, what they should be doing along their own decarbonization journey. So I think this is a very differentiated vision. It's one, across many different sectors and industries, many different operational teams throughout the enterprise. And where there may be companies that have different pieces and parts of this, you're not really going to find this level of technology and sustainability anywhere else. And so, as this vision, further matures, I think it's going to bring huge value to customers today, more than what they have, because it's just like a network effect as you start linking more and more of these applications together. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about, how we use that at IBM. As I mentioned, we call ourselves kind of client zero for this. Our sustainability platform, although each of those pieces may have been around for 10, 15, even 20 years, really linking this together and focusing on sustainability just started about a year or so ago with our new sustainability software platform. And so, a lot of this came about because our big team, our IBM Global Real Estate Team, or GRE, as you see here, right? We have over 50 million square feet of space under management, 800 locations in 100 countries. So that's a huge footprint to manage. Think about each country with different utilities, the way they measure power, what way they do water in each country is potentially different, right? The way the currencies are different in different countries. So all those things are different to kind of get a full picture on, and trying to do that manually, which we did for many, many years, making it very difficult. And in the end, we're only able to assess this maybe once a year, right? And so, we're no different than most companies out there. That's a once a year, but trying to change an organization with almost 300,000 people by just looking at something once a year and making an estimate on what are some of the top things to do, right, is only going to get you so far. And so we were looking for more technology in order to be able to make those assessments on a more regular basis, a quarterly basis at least. So after using this for about a year, getting all our data in line, we were able to reduce our sustainability reporting costs by 30%, right? So moving from manual processes to automated processes. So being able to feed data in directly versus like manual data entry. But even more important, we saw a 62% carbon reduction emissions versus the 2010 baseline in 2021. So that was super exciting for us, because that's a huge leap. And that's certainly maybe one of the biggest leaps you take, but we hope to continue to see continued progress along that path. And so we use the IBM Envisi ESG suite as our system of record. We pulled in data from Tririga to help manage our different facilities in those 800 different locations. We use the Maximo application suite. And then, of course, Turbonomic, we run a big cloud system. And so all these things were used, these technologies, we think really proved out that technology can make a bigger impact than just people doing manual processes alone. Next slide, please. So the key thing, is about action. And so the data gives you insights to turn sustainability ambition into action, right? To help you meet those, public goals and those targets that you've put out. There's a ton of sustainability solutions at IBM. And so we've put the links here. You can learn more about these solutions and technology. And, you think about IBM and the impact on society that IBM has done throughout, it's over 100 plus years of business, whether it's in the area of, computing, personal computing, artificial intelligence. And so it's really exciting that, IBM has turned it, our vision, we've turned our vision towards, sustainability and decarbonization, to bring the, IBM technology capabilities, the power of IBM, to this, huge global problem that we have. And so not only are we using these technologies internally, but working with customers. And the idea is that, we can operationalize this and really bring this at scale. So it's been great. Companies have been kind of chipping away at these issues, but as we know, climate change and global warming is still increasing. And so, we're looking to bring this technology and work with organizations in order to really make an impact. Because, 2050, where a lot of goals are set, maybe that's too late as we're already assessing. And so we want to make this impact today. And so we think that, that's a huge way for us to improve society and work with the communities and see improvements overall. So we're really excited by that. And so that's the key thing, is we want to help and work with our partners like Lucid Coast in order to work with you to bring this technology to you and help make you successful in supporting sustainability programs. So I appreciate the time on this, and turn it back to Jalen and see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Phil. That was great information. A lot of stuff in there, really valuable content. So yeah, sending it over to the LinkedIn Live and everybody in the chat. I wanted to see if anybody has any questions about the information provided today, maybe even bringing up specific cases within your organization that we could briefly discuss. And if it is something that we need to go more in depth of, you see the ticker below. There's also a link in the comment section on LinkedIn. You can schedule a free discovery call or free demo with myself or Phil. So yeah, throwing it out to the LinkedIn Live. Does anybody have any questions about the information that was discussed today?
Guess we answered all the questions.
I guess we did. We went over a lot of stuff, and that was really great. So if there's no questions at the moment, that's totally okay. We're just about 10 minutes early, so we could eventually cut y'all loose. get back to your workday. Just want to say thank you for participating today. Thank you for coming to this webinar. Super excited to have put this on. Thank you, Phil, for also taking part and giving this information.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no questions coming in, then we could cut this here. Thanks, everyone. Oh, wait, just kidding. Question came in. So at what size, Stephanie Ladoni says, at what size do you recommend a business start using sustainability software? That's a great question. Phil, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. So, for many organizations, once they start seeing the complexity, a lot of it's based on locations, that's difficult to manage manually. It wouldn't make sense if you have, just one or two locations and a minimal amount of data to assess, right? A lot of times, you can do that on your own, and that makes sense. There are still online tools you can use, spreadsheets that you can use. But we see a lot of our customers, once they start getting to 30, 40, 50 locations, more of like the medium size, I would say, and large enterprises, then that complexity becomes too much to handle manually, and they'll start adopting those tools. And so on the small business side, most likely you wouldn't have to use those tools, but for the medium and large organizations, seems to be kind of the sweet spot.
Nice. Thank you for the question, Stephanie. Now I'm curious, are there any other questions that may pop up in the chat? We can give a minute or two just in case people are typing things out. Okay. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, again, feel free to schedule a discovery call today. I would love to chat with you and your team to discuss what your organization is currently going through in regards to sustainability, to see if we can help you solve any pain points or problems that you're having to date. Where is the demo link? The demo link should be in the comment section on LinkedIn. I can go in and make sure that's there. So the demo link should be a Calendly link. I could post it in there again right now. So if you go into the comment section on this LinkedIn Live, there should be a comment posted by Lucy Coast saying, schedule a free discovery call with a link to my Calendly where we can have a meeting together. Thank you, Keith. Ellen Briggs says, are there tools to assist in the streamlining data from old systems to new systems? I'm a little curious when you say old systems to new systems. What do you mean by that? What comes to my head? So when you say streamlining data, so from, let's say, Excel to maybe potentially new systems like Invisi or Maximo, I would say when we are collecting all of that data, I would say, honestly, I'm not even qualified to answer that yet. Phil, do you have any thoughts on how we take the actual data and bring it into Invisi and or Maximo initially?
Yeah, I mean, data is data, right? And so this isn't any different data. Companies have been managing data for their existence. And so depending on kind of what format that data is, if that's what that means by kind of like the old systems to the new systems, we're not dealing with any kind of different thing. And so we've got connectors, we've got APIs, we've got, templates, EDI, there's all different ways to, transfer data from one system to the next. So we're not reinventing the wheel on anything like that. The bigger problem is like, where does the data sit? But we can build those connectors and build those integrations, from any of those locations. Some of our customers, very few of them, have it in a centralized location, but we're starting to see that more and more. Many of them come from many different sources, and so what we do is like we help analyze that, build those connectors for you, so that way you can move that data from what maybe you're calling the old system or what the existing system, gets into some of these, maybe new capabilities that you're bringing on board to make that easier for you, so it minimizes that manual change, manual integration of that data.
That makes sense. And just to follow up on that, we would work with your team to find all of that siloed data, whether it be in different meters, different facilities, softwares, such as like TMI and things like that, whether it's just on an Excel sheet, and we would work on that to then bring it all into a centralized place. Michelle Ritter asks, how can you research a company to see if they are as sustainable as they say they are? That's a great question, because when it comes to greenwashing, companies are going to put their best foot forward and lead with what they believe to be the most current or up-to-date data. One resource that I could offer up is there's this, I believe it's called a B company. Let me double check that real quick. But
I think you're talking about B Corp.
Yeah, but
not every company is B Corp. And so I would say the first thing one is, what have they put in their public sites? All right. If they're not listing anything there, if they're not publishing any information, that's very questionable, especially if they've already made some public announcements. But look at their website first. Second is there are numerous rating companies that are out there. So, companies like NASDAQ and Morningstar, MSCI, ISS. So they do ratings on both public and private organizations too. And you can go to those websites and you can search on tens of thousands of companies, and they provide a ratings. They're all different, those ratings companies. And so you may see one rating company gives a company a high rating for sustainability and another one a lower one. But those are different ways to look at that. But I would definitely look to see, what they've published, publicly on their own sites and understand that first.
And then there's also for specifically universities in America, they use, it's called AASHE, AASHE, and that gives different ratings. It's called the STARS report. So that'll actually rate different universities from platinum to bronze based on how well they're doing in their sustainability, in their sustainability landscape, from operations all the way to how much they're actually teaching about sustainability in their classes. But that's just a specific industry of universities. But then Phil mentioned those other ones as well. Thank you for the question. All right. Any more questions? We got about 3 minutes left before the top of the hour. So Keith asks, looking for their commitment to the SDGs or other frameworks to get indicate. Okay, so a comment that may be answering one of the past questions. Okay, scrolling through. Not seeing any more questions popping up in the chat. We're just about a couple minutes away from the top of the hour. So again, I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending and joining us today and to learn a little bit more about sustainability. Thank you, Phil, for the content and information. Much appreciated. And there is the discovery call, discovery session link. You could feel free to type that in manually, and then it's also in the comments in the LinkedIn. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.